Good afternoon. There is something in particular I want to share with you today before we get into any questions you might have. The subject could be called the impossibility of being lost, or it could be called the inevitability of waking up. And I want to give you two images. All of you have, I'm sure, seen a roulette wheel. And the ball is spun around a little groove before the speed drops and it falls into the turning wheel. But what I want you to do is to imagine that groove that the ball spins around at the beginning is at the top of a very large funnel. And although the ball spends some time in the groove repeating its track, it finally loses momentum and falls into the upper part of the funnel. And it continues to go around and around, but as it goes slower and slower, it gets lower and lower in the funnel until it arrives at the bottom tip of the funnel and falls out. You could say that as you made a choice to exert self-will, to say, Father, I'd rather do it myself, or Father, I'd rather do it my way, and you seemed to create for yourself circumstances that the Father was not creating for you. That is the equivalent of the ball being spun in the groove at the top of the funnel. The fact is, though, that you do not have enough willpower to keep the ball going at sufficient speed to keep it in the groove. And so momentum is lost. And mind you, in this funnel, if you will imagine that this funnel is sitting in the middle of infinity, it's as though you, in the choice to be willful, abandoned infinity for a fixed track located somewhere in infinity. And back to the illustration, as the path of your willfulness loses momentum and you get lower and lower in the funnel and finally come to the tip, what happens? Through no effort of your own, you fall back out into the middle of infinity and you are not enclosed in the funnel. Arriving at the bottom of the funnel and falling out of the limited circumference of the funnel happens because not enough willpower could continue to be expressed to maintain you in a seemingly confined environment. Waking up, coming back into the full infinite experience of being is inevitable and does not take effort on your part. It doesn't take learning on your part. It doesn't take becoming better and better. Now, the other example I would like to use would be that of, let us imagine the Pacific Ocean. And there are little potential drops of water that say, remember that ride we took? I want to take that ride again. Let's get up near the surface. And so these potential drops of water get up to near the surface where evaporation can occur and their essential H2O-ness becomes a vapor and goes up into the sky, and its bigness is lost. It's separated now from the wholeness of what it was, and it dances around and floats around until there's enough condensation over land that now this ride that started with a rise from the ocean continues with the condensation and in falling. And the falling can take a number of forms. It can be as drops of water, or it can be as flakes of snow, or it can be as a ball of hail. And one of the little drops remembers from the last trip that it was going down a particular river, and it's hoping this lifetime, this trip, that it will be able to manage to get over into an eddy in a particularly beautiful, broad expanse of the river, so it can stay and enjoy the beauty, in effect, so it can hold up its inevitable trip back to the ocean. Another one says, last time I landed as snow and melted off into a river. And another one, and he says, this time I want to fall over land and see what that experience will be. And so it does fall on land, and it does get absorbed into the ground, and it does go into the groundwater and eventually into an aquifer, and it eventually finds itself coming up through the pipes in someone's house, and it gets drunk, and then it gets eliminated, and then it goes through a sewage processing plant, which it doesn't find particularly pleasant. And he says, I want to avoid this the next trip. And there, of course, could be a million scenarios. But the point is that, like the drop of water in the sewage plant, it gets the effluent, or the processed water gets pumped out, and it joins with all of the rest of the water, which is one way or another heading back to the ocean. The inevitability of coming back to your source is absolute. And the drop of water has to do nothing to get there except to function the way water functions. So here you are, and your experience is easy or rough, pleasant or unpleasant. And if there's enough unpleasantness, you're likely to say, I'm failing. I'm lost. But the only way you can be lost is in the middle of the process of the inevitability of waking up. And so you cannot actually be lost. You cannot actually keep yourself from moving back home, because the movement is beyond your control, beyond your willful control. Your movement back to full open consciousness is inevitable, because your trip away from it is happening in the middle of it, just like the limited experience of the funnel is occurring in the middle of infinity. And because you can't maintain willfulness indefinitely, whatever momentum your willfulness brought into play will lose its strength, and you will effortlessly find yourself, you will effortlessly find that all the time you were making things difficult for yourself by virtue of willfulness, you were still on your way out of the effects of willfulness. You were still on your way home. Because you can't be unnatural indefinitely because God didn't give you the power to do that. Do you see? So what does that mean? It means, in practical terms, that you can't be lost, that no matter how rugged things seem to be going and no matter how willful you know you're being, you are still doing this in the middle of the movement of the river that's taking you home. So, you don't have to get hung up on how well you're doing, or judging yourself, or assuming that it's going to take 10 more lifetimes of refining your soul before you'll be worthy, because worthiness has nothing to do with it. How good you're being has nothing to do with it. All it has to do with is an expression of willfulness that, unlike the Energizer Bunny, will run down. So now, if you are inevitably going to wake up, if you are inevitably going to come back into the full conscious experience of your right mind, then instead of trying to improve yourself, you can begin to yield into the unknown, into what you're not in control of, with confidence that everything will configure around you in a way that identifies what you truly are, just because that's the way it works. Do you see what I'm saying? You know, some people question me or question what I'm saying when I talk about getting into the not thinking place, going into the silence. Going into the silence can be misused. It can be used as a way of escaping from things. But that is not what I am talking about when I'm talking about going into the silence. When I'm talking about going into the silence, I'm talking about going into that place where willfulness is not being employed. It's especially not being employed by thinking processes. And I encourage you to go into this place. Why? So that you can be safe? No. So that you're in the place where you're making so little noise with the chattering of your mind that you can be infilled with the inevitable influx of inspiration and revelation of the Father's point of view. Whether it is infilling you directly from the Father or from your guide who is working on your behalf, on behalf of the Father, or whether it's the Holy Spirit, it's because the void, the silence, the emptiness is pregnant with the fuller conscious experience of being that it's your birthright to be experiencing. So, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that if awakening is inevitable, if you cannot be lost, and that if you abandon the practice of willfulness, you will spontaneously and effortlessly wake up. I am trying to convey to you that you can dare to have confidence in the way things work that are beyond your control, because the way things work stand on your behalf in terms of moving you back into your right mind. The full conscious experience of enlightenment, the full conscious experience of being all and only that which God is expressing of himself/herself right where you are. No longer having any experience, any illusory experience of being separate from your source. No longer experiencing an illusory sense of having a private mind of your own separate from the mind of God. In other words, I'm trying to convey to you that everything, absolutely everything that is real, is on your side. And the way it works cannot help but support you back into the conscious experience of the kingdom of heaven. Of you feeling utterly and completely fulfilled beyond your wildest imagination of what fulfillment is right here as you sit here today. So, if you don't have to work at waking up, if you don't have to work at bettering yourself, and you can dare to yield into the way things work, then what is left for you to do? Something I talk about all the time. Be curious. You don't be curious to save yourself from something. You be curious because you're missing out on more of what God is being and more of what you're capable of experiencing by virtue of not having been curious, because you're working so damned hard to survive and keep that ball rolling around the inside of the funnel from getting to the point of the funnel and falling out. You see? Let every day be a day in which you bring curiosity into play. Not curiosity to find out what makes that bastard so malicious or so terrible or so resistant or so stubborn. You don't want to be curious as to the why of something ugly going on. You want to be curious to see what God is being there in spite of what you are seeing, so that the vision of what is really going on there can supplant your current perception. So you want to be always curious to that about everything which is just beyond your present sense of it. That which God is being right there, just beyond your sense of it. And curiosity, well, Isn't it fascinating? Isn't it delightful to watch a child, especially the younger the child is, express curiosity? Well, start expressing that same delightful curiosity every day, instead of assuming that you have fouled things up so bad that you are permanently lost and there's no point in being curious. There's no point in doing anything other than trying to cope with the problem, trying to master the problem on your own through the use of your will over the circumstance or situation. I mean to convey to you that waking up is less complicated than you make it. And you can be lighter about it. You see? Does anyone have a yes, but?
Raj, I've thought about this making an effort business. And I remember last year you said if we want things to change, we need to make some changes. So that's come into my mind as you've been speaking. And then my yes, but about the curiosity is that I've discovered under the fear and pain a big no in me, like a big no.
To?
Life, God, the flow. So...
How wonderful.
Oh.
How wonderful that you managed to be still enough, long enough, to find that that was there. Now you know what it is you want to see beyond. You see, when you're busy coping with circumstances through the use of will and manipulation, even for the best reasons, you distract yourself from the no that's underneath, or whatever it is that's underneath, and yet the no that's underneath is what is motivating the way in which you cope with your world. And until you become still for a moment, you can't find out what's going on underneath. You can't discover, wow, I've been saying no to life. So when you discover in the silence that you've been saying no, what have you discovered? You've discovered that an expression of willfulness has been occurring unconsciously. The word no is an opposition to yielding, to being in the flow. That's an act of will because your nature is to flow. Your nature is to be in the movement. Your nature is the movement itself. And so you have discovered that you have been being willful and keeping the willfulness out of mind by coping with things out there and trying to control them. Now you've made the discovery that you are exercising will. Not only that, you're exercising will against life. Now you don't really have any problem looking at that and saying, well, this isn't a very constructive thing for me to be doing. I don't know if I want to be doing this. You know? I know I don't want to be doing this because I know if I am practicing willfulness, if I am exercising will at odds with life, at odds with God, not only am I going to be in an ongoing state of fear and anxiety, I am blocking myself from experiencing life as God is being it. So my practice of willfulness is to my detriment, and because I've seen that I'm doing it, I can now choose not to do it. I can choose to give my attention in another direction. And the way you do that is you say, what is your will, God? What would you have me do? What would you have me be? What would you have me say? What would I find myself doing if I yielded to you? You see? In shifting your attention from the willfulness of saying no to life, you are withdrawing your energy from it. And so the no will diminish. Just because you are not giving it your attention, and you are giving your attention in the area of what? Curiosity. God, what would you have me be? What would you have me say? That's curiosity. So this is excellent. Don't get hung up on discovering that within yourself you're saying no to life. Let it be just a piece of information, not a basis for evaluating or judging your worth.
Yeah. But, right. At present, it feels like this no has a great force to just do itself.
Well, it doesn't. But I understand the feeling.
And I just feel like clamped down or shut down from the flow I'm experiencing. That's how I notice it now. And I don't know what to do. Because I seem to be in it, and then I stop it.
Well, it's like doing a meditation. Yeah. On this past Wednesday evening, this subject came up because you are prompted by the Course to become still a moment. Well, if you truly become still a moment, in effect, that is usually understood to mean to withdraw from the world as you're experiencing it, and to withdraw from the way you're thinking about it, and to become still. Well, there are actually two stages to becoming still a moment. Because the first stage, when you become still a moment, allows you to discover just what you've discovered, that underneath there's willfulness of one form or another going on that causes stress and distorts your experience of life. Now, you must become still a moment again. In other words, you must let that awareness of the willful no, you must let that stand aside so that you may choose once again to go into the stillness, to become quiet again. And the reason for becoming quiet again is so that you're not distracted by the ego dynamic, and you're in the void now, where you can hear what God has to say to you. Willfulness is always a choice. Being angry is always a choice. Being jealous is always a choice. Being spiteful or malicious is always a choice. And most often you employ these choices unconsciously, because what you think you're doing is protecting yourself against the bastards out there. You think you're dealing with them, and you miss the point that in dealing with them, you have thoughtlessly chosen to employ inner attitudes which keep you from your peace, and keep you from being clear, and keep you from the inspiration that would transform the bastards out there. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, I really do.
So there's two steps to being still a moment. First one, lets you leave the world out there for a bit while you become quiet and not preoccupied with it.